So recently I uploaded this video called the US History 1700s video, and oh boy, it was so bad. It was like so bad. It was 4 minutes filler heavy of me just rambling across stuff that has nothing to do with the video. It was so bad I even had to comment on people to skip across that part to get to the point of the video. It was so bad. So this is why I'm gonna make the 1800s introduction really quick, because 1800s is actually very long. It's probably gonna be the longest of all series because a lot of stuff happened to the 1800s, including Civil War, and it's one of the most groundbreaking US history moments of the whole entire US history. Also, happy late Cinco de Mayo, even though no one really celebrated. Okay, let's first obviously start in the 1800s. So the Natchez Trail soon started to post rule across the Old Town Road. Okay, I'm sorry, but they too started to go on the old trail across Nashville, Tennessee to the Natchez River, Mississippi, which is established across all of the Congress. Some other events that happened in the 1800s, including it's the time where the U.S. Library of Congress is founded. It's also the time where slavery ended in the Northwest Territory of Ordinance of 1787, establishing territory and written by Thomas Jefferson. And it's also the time where John Adams is established as the first president to live in the White House, or the Executive Mansion, as previously known by the U.S. Congress in the first session of Washington, D.C. Well, the next year is the 1801. There's a lot of stuff that happened, including it's the time period where John Marshall appears to appoint Chief Justice of Supreme Court. Also, Thomas Jefferson was elected the third president, and also Tripoli declared war against the U.S. And also, first edition of New York Trust was published. 1802, there was the war between the Tripoli and Sweden, and continuously there's battle against negotiation through the compensation. 1803 is gonna be long. So the first of all, the U.S. State Supreme Court overturns against the first U.S. law in case of the Marbury-Medino establishing connect of judicial review, as they declare as the statute within the Constitution void. Also, the Ohio is admitted as the 17th state of the Union, and Louisiana Purchase was bought by U.S. Once upon a time in past history, there were two men that were soldiers across Jefferson. These two men basically go on an expedition across St. Louis, Missouri to go across the Missouri River for expedition across the West. Also, the battle between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr as political rivalries begin. In 1805, the Michigan Territory was established. In 1806, Lewis and Clark again on Corba Discovery through the 1,000-mile trek back to St. Louis, Missouri across the Pacific Ocean. A second expedition happened in Fort Bella in 14 whatever near St. Louis. And also in 1807, first steamboat journey across by Robert Fulton. Steamboat navigate across the Hudson River, and soon Congress passed an act that prohibits slave importation. 1811, contract for the construction of Cumberland Road is assigned. Also, Rod was being important as an important route for westward expansion. Also, the first steam tower easy ferry service between New York City and New Jersey is being started across steam service, and the Battle of Tippecanoe. Next, we have the 1812. So basically what happened in 1812 is that US President Madison asked the Congress to declare war on the UK, so they did declare the war against the company. And soon the British ship raced against the blockade against the US. And also the War of 1812 happened. In 1813, the Battle of York is being held in City Directory of Albany, New York. Also, American Navy won across the Battle of Lake Erie. In 1814, a settlement on large parts of Alabama and Georgia after Andrew Jackson Militia defeat the Red Stick Creek Chief. Other stuff that happened in 1814 includes stuff like the White House burning by the British up until the War of 1812 in Washington, D.C. Also, the Battle of Lake Champlain is won by the U.S. Naval Force with USS Ticonderoga, whatever, leading way. Also, Francis Scott decides to write the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? Peace treaty was also signed between the British and U.S. In the year 1815, the first American railroad is being chartered in New Jersey, and soon in 1816, the second Bank of U.S. is being chartered 5 years after the expiration of the first Bank of U.S. Also, Indiana became the 19th state. And soon in 1817, James Monroe became the president. Also, Rush-Bagot Treaty was being limited across the Great Lake by British and American force, and Erie Canal construction started across the Mississippi River invasion thing. And soon in 1818, the invasion of Florida through the Seminole. Okay, so we have the main base for our flag, our 20 stars on the corner, but we also need a color for the stripe. What color should it be? Oh, how about red and white? Because apparently that's for purity, and blood also for the freedom. So let's just put our flag. Also, Illinois became the 21st state, if you're curious. In 1819, Talmadge Amendment passed by the U.S. House of Representatives. Also, territory of Florida was being ceded by the U.S. by Spain in the Admission Treaty. Soon in 1820, the Missouri Compromise Bill, which is sponsored by Henry Clay, was being passed in the U.S. Congress, and soon in 1821, the possession of territory of Florida is being taken by the U.S. after a purchase and agreement with Spain, and the first legal international ride on Santa Fe Trail began with the Missouri trader William Bickel. In 1822, Florida became a territory of the USA, and law prohibiting state of alcohol for Indian is passed. In 1823, the War Department issued an order expedition up the Red River along the 49th parallel. Also, Arikari Indian War started. In 1824, the Bureau of Indian Affairs established by the U.S. War Department, and soon the Frontier Treaty was being signed. In 1825, the Creek Indian gave up their last land to the U.S. government to move west. Also, John Quincy Adams became the 6th President of the United States. In 1826, there's a sad story. As July 4th, Independence Day, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams passed away. Until 1827, the Senate ratified the Treaty of Limit, establishing across the Saline River as the Mexican and U.S. border cross. And Baltimore and Ohio Railroad became the first railroad for transporting goods, and also New York slavery was being established. In 1828, the Treaty of Limit was signed with Mexico. Also, the copyright for the American Dictionary was being registered across the English language. Also, the opposing for the Tariff of Abomination across the state of South Carolina began the process of formal notification campaign. In 1829, Jackson became president. Yep, that's really what happened. In 1830, the U.S. Congress approved the Indian Removal Act, which facilitated the relocation of Indian tribes from East Mississippi. In 1831, the first bank robbery happened in U.S. New York City Bank. In 1832, the first act of Congress to protect natural resources was being signed by Jackson, and the Black Hawk Act began in Illinois to Wisconsin, and telegraph was being invented. The first wagon crossed Continental Divided Oregon Trail as Wisconsin. In 1833, the U.S. Congress passed the Compromise Tariffs Act against the cession of the South Carolina objection. Also, Force Bill is being signed by Andrew Jackson to authorize him to use the troops to enforce the federal law. Also in 1834, the Pennsylvania Main Line Canal was being linked by Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Stuff that happened in 1835 includes the time where the Revolution of Texas began with the Battle of Gonzales, I think is how you pronounce it. Well, I don't know Mexicans. And also New York City raged fire, destroyed over 530 buildings, including the New York Stock Exchange building. And also there's the Cherokee tribe that was forced to sea land in Georgia and cross Mississippi after the go to find the Treaty of New Echota. In 1836, the first convention of American Whig Party takes place. Also, there's the Battle for Alamo, which basically is caused by the Battle of San Jacinto, however you pronounce it. 1837, Martin Van Buren became president. And also, second economical crisis known as the Panic of 1837 occurred. In 1838, the first Morse code is being used for communication services across the international world, and territory of Iowa was being organized. Population usually isn't that common across the West, like most population isn't that common, but however, it all changes in 1839, where the University of Missouri, the first university west of Mississippi River, was being established. Also in 1840, the off-cache Long Island steamship crashed, and also the Great Natchez Trace faced a tornado strike. In 1841, the first wagon trail of California leave from the Mississippi for independence. In 1842, Prelude wagon, prior to the Mexican War, started to go under Mexican leader Rafael Velasquez, invading Texas and occupying all of San Antonio. Also, second organized wagon trail on Oregon started to leave across Elm Grove, Missouri. Also, People Party of Providence, Rhode Island is founded, and also border between U.S. and Canada fixation east of Rocky Mountain. In 1843, the first Minstrel of U.S. debuted. Also, the Black Hawk Troop of the 1st U.S. Dragoon from Fort Scotch, Kansas, joined the Squaxian Indian Territory. In 1844, the first message sent in telegraph was being transmitted. Also, U.S. signed Treaty of Wankhee with China. In 1845, the Congress of Texas voted for annexation of U.S. with major Texas vote approving the Constitution. Also, U.S. President Polk decided to revolt against the Manifesto Destiny. Next year, in 1846, the amazing President Zachary Taylor caused the major conflicts of Mexican War in the northern part of the Rio Grande River along with the Palo Alto River. Also, California became independent from Mexico. Also, in 1847, the battle for Mexico City was being fought. In 1848, gold was being found in California by Barbary, and a bunch of stuff happened, which leads to the gold rush. We talked about it in the California video. Also, Treaty of Guadalupe ended with Mexican War, with Mexico relinquishing river from Texas. In 1849, the first U.S. baseball uniform was being made in New York for the Knickerbocker Club. In 1850, the former became the 13th president, also the Compromise of 1850. In 1851, the first American Cup yaking race was being inaugurated. Also, the first YMCA was being put in Boston. In 1852, nothing happened. In 1853, Franklin Pierce became president. Also, Indian Frontier Front, Fort Scott in Indian Territory, Kansas, was being inaugurated in the U.S. Army. In 1854, Kansas-Nebraska Act became law. In 1855, the first railroad train began across the Mississippi River. In 1856, Fort Buchanan was being established by U.S. In 1857, Buchanan became the 15th president. Also, the U.S. Supreme Court decided to rule in the Dred Scott decision. In 1858, the strife between pro and anti-slavery began, leading to the Civil War. In 1859, Oregon became the 33rd state. Also, U.S. Army at Confluence decided to go on across these two rivers. Also, John Brown decided to hunger around for treason by Virginia. And also, 1860, Pony Express began. In 1861, Montgomery, Alabama wanted to leave the Union and join the Confederacy, so they hold a convention across that because they are in the South. And also, Abraham Lincoln became president. Also, Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina became harbored by the Confederate force after the Army commander. And also, the Battle of Bull Run happened. During 1862, the USS Monitor won against the battle against the Confederacy. Also, Army of Tennessee under General Grant's repulse of Confederate Army earlier of the Battle of Sheila, Tennessee happened. Also, Homestead Act was being approved, and the Battle of Fredericksburg under the Union troop was crossing across the Rappahannock River. Also, the Dakota War happened between Sioux and U.S. In 1863, in 1864, the Battle of Wilderness in Spotsylvania happened by General Grant. In 1865, Robert E. Lee, as the commander-in-chief of the Confederate force, surrendered his 27,000 army to Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse, ending the Civil War. Also, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was being discovered, and it turns out that John Booth was assassinated in Fort Cedar, Washington, D.C. In 1865, also, the 13th Amendment abolished slavery. In 1866, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was being passed. Also, weight and measure standardized in the U.S. when the Metric Act of 1866 was being passed by the Congress. Also, the final congressional selection of the year in Republican election was being put in KKK 4. In 1867, the U.S. bought Alaska from Russia for about $7.2 million after signing the Treaty of Cession. Also, in 1868, the impeachment trial of Andrew Johnson began in Senate to charge the tenor of his act by Secretary of War. Also, the first patent by Edison and the 14th Amendment was being passed. In 1869, the first black fighter financially occurred in New York City. Also, in one of the first acts of success in women's suffrage movement happened in Wyoming. In 1870, the 15th Amendment allowed black people to also Georgia became the last former basic Confederate state to be reamended to the Union. Also, the Confederacy dissolved in 1871. The Great Fire of Chicago started in 1872. The world's first national park was being established across Grant in the Wyoming National Park, which is the Yellowstone National Park. Also, the civil rights was being restored across citizens across the South, causing the annexation of 1872. Also, Sudan Vietnamese women. In 1873, the 7th Cavalry War Command under the Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong, and also the Women's Crusade of 1873 and 1874 started when women on Fredonia, New York started to march on Lickford. Also, economical depression began in New York, stock market crashed. In 1874, the first zoo in Fairmount, Philadelphia began. Also, elephants symbolized in Republican and Greenback Park organized. In 1875, the Civil Rights Act of 1875, also trade treaty by U.S. across Hawaii and the U.S. During 1876, the Native American system started to issue the term reserve land, leading to the Great Sioux War of 1876, also known as the Black Hill War. Also, the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition was Fairman to celebrate the 100th birthday of USA. Happy birthday! You know the court session is about to be over during 1877 across the joint session of U.S. Congress, which convenes against the presidential election dispute reaching across the compromise of 1877 across the election of Rutherford B. Hayes, also Indian leader of Ogatala, Sioux Crazy Horse surrender in U.S. Army in Nebraska, which soon later leads to the next peace war. During 1878, Lincoln County War began in New Mexico between two groups of wealthy businessmen. In 1879, Rutherford B. Hayes signed a bill that allows female authority to basically argue Union Supreme Court case in 1800, James Garfield became a Republican president. During 1883, the Pennington Civil Service Reform Act is being passed by Congress over the hauling Federal Civil Service. Also, the Brooklyn Bridge is being opened under the construction by Chairman John Han. Also, there's also the U.S. Supreme Court placed a false against part of Civil Rights Act of 1875 through the basic constitutional, unconstitutional to be specific, allowing individual of corps to basically discriminate races. And also, 5 standard time zone was being established in U.S. During 1884, the U.S. Naval War League was being founded in Newport, Rhode Island. Also, the first postseason game between the National League Championships and the American Association Champion battle began. Also, across the rail that people have rode horses on, because I'm gonna take my horse to the Old Town Road. Yeah, how many Old Town Road references have there been? Well, moving on. 1885, the Statue of Liberty arrived in New York Harbor. 1886, Haymarket riot bombing in Chicago, and also pharmacist John Proper invented the Coke. During 1887, Pearl Harbor, flash forward, naval base started to leash across the U.S. naval upon the U.S. Senate. Also, the first Groundhog Day, which no one freaking celebrate, is observed in Pennsylvania. 1888, Washington Monument was officially being opened. Also, in 1889, the legislature was being signed by Grover Cleveland and set for the first public land connecting across the Casa Grande in the Arizona Territory. Also, the deadliest flood in American history occurred in Johnston, Pennsylvania. During the 1890 Texas the Battle of Wounded Knee happened in South Dakota. Also in 1891, the 51st Congress of U.S. passed the International Copyright Act of 1891. Also, the Carnegie Hall happened in New York with the first public performance. Also, the first basketball game happened in 1892. The first Ellis Island opened. Also, the basic General Electricity Company is formed by General Electric Company with Thomas Houston Company. Also, the first recital of Pledge of Allegiance. In 1893, the Chicago World Columbian Exposition held in the World Fair host one of the biggest events, and the Ferris wheel was being invented. In 1895, the first football game happened in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Also, the first U.S. state golf course happened in USGA in Newport, Rhode Island. 1896, the Plessy versus Ferguson. Also, the Klondike Gold Rush happened. 1897, oil was discovered in the Indian Territory on land leased from the basic Usago tribe. 1898, the blockade of Cuba happened. Also, the bombing of San Juan, Puerto Rico, and also the peace treaty in Spanish-American War. And finally, 1899, the U.S. Congress approved of the voting of federal election. Also, the open door policy with China decided by Zhang He. Okay, we're done. We're finally done. Enjoy the 1800s. We finally finished the 1800s. So the 1900s is gonna be next, and oh boy, it's gonna be also as long.